Hello and welcome to the Aetherdrift debut after show. We're gonna slow things down a little bit. That got my heart racing. We're gonna slow things down and take a deep dive into the set and the worlds and the characters and all the things Aetherdrift. And to do that, I have three fantastic guests with me today. Let's go around and start by introducing yourself and what you did for Aetherdrift.
Yes, hello, I'm Yoni Skolnik. I was the set design lead, so I led the final portion of creating the set, working with a wide variety of teams to make sure everything comes together.
All right. Mark, who are you?
I'm Mark Rosewater. I was the vision design lead. I did the early part of the design and handed off to Yoni.
All right, and Miguel.
Hi, everyone. I'm Miguel Lopez. I was the world building lead on this set, which meant that I got a document from Mark and then worked with Yoni and a few art directors to help bring this set to life.
Yeah. So we are going to preview a bunch of new cards. We're going to dive a little bit deeper on the mechanics and the design of the set and how all of this came together. And we're going to do so over the next hour or so. If we have time, we'll get to some questions to hear from you and what you want to know about the set. But let's kick things off with, this is a racing set. They're racing for a prize. We gotta kick things off with some bling, with one of the prizes you can get in this set, a special guest. So we're going to talk more about special guests next week, but here is one of the special guests, Chrome Mox, coming in that borderless and that first place foiling on the right. Chrome Mox is going to be one of the special guests in this set. Now, that foiling, we're going to be showing off a lot of it, and as usual, the digital version doesn't do the physical version justice, and so we also have a short video here that's going to show off some of the lands and kind of show what this looks like in real life.
Much shinier.
Much shinier. Yeah, less matte yellow. Yeah, these first place foil cards are gorgeous. You're going to be getting these in box toppers. So the play boosters and collector booster boxes are going to be coming with a box topper pack that has a land in it, as well as a rare or mythic in that treatment as well. So as we go through this, as you see those first place foils pop up, that's where you're going to be getting those. So Chrome Mox, very exciting, but this whole set is exciting, and it's meant to feel that way, right? That was kind of the design challenge, Mark.
Yeah, so basically what happened was the idea of a death race we've actually had in our pocket for, 5, 6, 7 years. But it wasn't until we were, sometimes in design, like you have different ideas come together. So when we had March of the Machine, we sort of changed the cosmology of the entire multiverse. We created Omen Paths. So we said to ourselves, what can we do that we can't do before? Like, one of the reasons to make the change is to allow us to make sets we couldn't make. And so we made a long list of like, well, what could you do that you couldn't do before? So one of the things I called a travel log set. Well, instead of being on one world, we could travel between worlds, so there could be some continuity. And when we came up with that idea, we liked a lot the idea that, like, well, we could, rather than have one world, you could peek in at a bunch of different worlds. But we said, why? Like, we had to have a reason to do it. So we went back to our list of other things we were looking at, and we said, oh, how about the death race? What if it was a race between worlds? Like, it made a lot of sense that the race, it could be on one world, but isn't it more exciting if they're racing between worlds? That's it, like it upped the excitement. And so really, like, death race and travelogue sort of came together, and like each of them got the other one to go, oh, together, this is the package that we wanted.
Okay, and then Miguel, when that concept came to world building, or when you started working on that, how did you then end up on these three planes with this whole concept, the Ghirapur Grand Prix?
Yeah, sure. So when a concept comes down and hits world building's desk, or my desk at least, my main goal is always trying to make the world like the setting internally consistent, right? Like it follows a logic that makes sense in the context in which it's presented. So for our three planes, we were thinking that we wanted to show off a broad swath of environments, right? We wanted an urban environment. We wanted something that hit the sort of hit the death race, like markers of what a death race is, and then a bit of a wild card for our third. So Avishkar, that would be a perfect setting for it's a vibrant cityscape. We haven't been there in a long time. It was before my time as a player, but like as a world builder, it's a really exciting plane. to get to return to. It's super rich with history and revolutionary potential.
Real quick.
Mark,
I forgot to mention,
yeah.
the death race was on Aetherspark the whole time. Like, that was always on Aetherspark.
Yeah.
The idea of this vehicle race and Aetherspark, like, that was joined together. So when we went to say, what should we do? The answer wasn't even, what are the 3 worlds? It's like, well, clearly it's Aetherspark, and then we need 2 other worlds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do we pick those 2 other worlds?
2 other worlds. Well, Amonkhet certainly hit, like, at the outset when it was a bit more death race than it sort of wound up being like a combat sport at the end. Amonkhet really hit that death race note, right? This is a twice over post-apocalyptic plane covered in ruins and deserts. Obviously, like, as we dug into world building and art dev for it and worked with consultants, we wanted to sort of bring a bit more life into it, make it a place that was less a ruin and more a place of potential as well. Muruganda is kind of one of those things where, like, sometimes on the world building team, we just get to shoot a shot and see if it happens, and Muruganda just happened, and it was a sort of a lot of fun momentum running into this place that was, like, kind of a blank slate design wise to really, like, I don't know. It was a really fun visual and world building sandbox for me. I'm sure Yanni and Mark can speak more to the design aspects of it as well.
Let me tell you a little bit, like, more behind, like, so there were a lot of, like, constraints we had, right? We wanted to do 3 different worlds. And we originally talked about doing 4 different worlds, and then we did the math. We realized that the set couldn't fit. Like, 3 worlds made more sense than 4. So what we did is there were a couple of rules we had. One was originally it had to have a style guide, meaning we had to have been to the world, and because we're making 3 different worlds, and so it's tricky to just make 3 brand new worlds. And the other thing was we saw this as an opportunity to revisit worlds that people had wanted to go to that we just didn't have space for. One of the dynamics that's tricky is about half our worlds are new and about half are returns. And so we keep banking places we could go back to, but we have only so many slots to go back.
Yeah.
And that one of the reasons we liked the travel log is it let us go to places that we wanted to go back, but we didn't have room on the schedule. So when we were plotting things out, there's a bunch of worlds we are going back to, Lorwyn, stuff like that. So we took that off the table, Tarkir, stuff like that we knew we were doing. And then we said, okay, what has a style guide that we could go back to? And we made a list. And the list got chopped down really quickly for all sorts of technical reasons.
Yeah.
And in the end, we picked 2 planes beyond Avishkar, and that one of the 2 of them we ended up, like, for other reasons, we saved it for something else we didn't end up doing. And so we had to look for a plane that we didn't have a style guide for, and that's when we sort of looked around. And so we decided it should be one of the planes that was on the battles, essentially. That was kind of our short list. Like, we've hinted at those worlds, and we've named those worlds. And really what we wanted was kind of what is cool seeing race cars driving through. And so we really did like the idea of the prehistoric world was, Muruganda was our prehistoric world. We're like, oh, like, it really was a contrast to the city, and it really was a contrast to the desert. And that's one of the things we wanted is we wanted each of these to seem very, very different. And we had talked about doing, like, prehistoric world forever, and Muruganda had been, like, I think Future Sight was our first tease at it, because we knew, like, one day we knew we'd go there, so we teased at Future Sight, and we really haven't quite gone there. And so when we had to pick a world that we hadn't gone to, we went to the creative team, obviously, and we said, this is kind of what we want to do, but it requires some work because we didn't have a lot of work on it. In fact, we looked at all the cards that were on it, and we said we knew 3 things. It had to have dinosaurs, oozes, and large plants. That's what we knew.
Yeah. All right. Well, part of returning to the worlds, Yanni, is making cards that feel familiar to places. So the Gearhulk cycle was slam dunk. It was, really evocative in original Kaladesh at the time. So talk a bit. Let's put one up on the screen and talk a bit about bringing those back.
Yeah, so we wanted to bring him back, but of course we wanted to find some twist. We considered a lot of things, but ended up on the very simple solution of they're 2 colors, they've got 2 keywords, and I think they ended up in a very exciting place, and I'm excited to see what they do in competitive formats.
Yeah, speaking of competitive formats, this one looks fairly strong.
Oh yeah, we felt like blue and black needed more powerful creatures that also give you ways to control the board and disrupt people, so brought this guy out.
Yeah.
And we should put, this is an allied cycle.
Allied cycle, okay. All right, and then I think this one has a few different versions to it as well. Miguel, so we've talked a bit about the first place foil cards. But Miguel, I'm interested in that graffiti style there. What is that meant to evoke?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the graffiti style, we're going to see it across a bunch of different cards. The graffiti that our art director's design in the background is entirely bespoke, right? It's made up for this set, these treatments. It's sort of a nod. In chatting with some of our art designers preparing for this, what they wanted to convey is that this is a nod to like Avishkar's, youthful, like post-revolutionary orientation, right? So like graffiti is an art style that demands precision, skill, and speed. It sort of feels like a really nice parallel to like the vehicle and beast racing that we're going to see in this set. It's like certainly of a similar ethos, coming from an underground to be accepted, yet still sort of a transgressive art form, and so on. So it's really intended to like to continue to bring that theming present in the set from the world building through to its art style, one of the art treatments as well.
Yeah, and I see Yoni wants to say something. I see people in chat talking about the yellow border. This is what we were talking about with that video. This does not do it justice. We're going to have more videos on social media. The video we showed earlier with the basic lands, that was an example of that foiling. The foiling is going to look more like that and less like matte yellow. So
our advancement is that it's yellow.
It's not just yellow. It is shiny. It looks really good in person. But yeah, Yanni, you want to talk?
Yeah, we landed on the allied colors partially because the next set we've got coming out, Tarkir Dragonstorm, focuses more on the enemy colors with its wedges and clans. So we wanted to give the allied colors something to get excited about here.
All right. Well, speaking of getting them excited, we do have a second Gearhulk we can show off while we're still talking about Gearhulk. So here's Pyrewood Gearhulk, a 7/7 for 6 mana. That pumps all your other creatures. This does a lot, Yanni.
Yeah, it makes all your creatures very big, very hard to block, and itself is just pretty huge and commands the battlefield. And yeah, I love the flavor text on this card, referencing Ren's role in March of the Machine, helping out the plane.
Oh yeah, I didn't even catch that the first time. A mighty memorial to a fallen savior. Yeah. So how many iterations, Yanni, did you go through for these Gearhulks? Did some of them like brain to print? Did you go through a lot of different versions of these? Because I know you're sculpting them for tournament play.
Yeah, we went through a lot, mostly working with different schemes. Like we considered versions where we had additional other mechanics or were using other elements of a set. But at the end, we ended up with this more simple, they have one very splashy enters the battlefield ability like the original Gearhulks, but 2 keywords.
2 keywords. Okay, so you see the Vigilance and Menace here. The black-blue one had Lifelink and Ward.
Yep.
Okay, makes sense. So they all follow that pattern.
Yeah.
All right, very cool. All right, so now let's move on to, we're gonna talk about the lands a bit. The lands are certainly important from a flavor perspective, but they're also pretty powerful here because we're getting the second half of a cycle that we've already seen. So let's throw those up on the screen.
Yeah, the one thing really interesting about the lands is because we're doing a race, the idea of seeing where you're going and seeing the environment, like in a travelogue set where we have 3 times the worlds to see, lands even have a much larger role of showing off all the places we're going.
Yeah, well, and I mean, you can even see that sort of conceptually here where it's in a place, but the portal's to another place, and that's how you get the mana from both. But Miguel, I'm also interested, all of this flavor text is about loot, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think we're trying to hint that Loot is a relatively important character in the story and world building. So, Loot. So for I should say about Loot. Loot is he's a very young creature. He's a beast that is found inside the vault on Thunder Junction, also known as Mag Terra now. You'll see quotes on there from Jace, from Vraska, from Chandra, people in Avishkar who've interacted with him. Jace, obviously, he if you've read the story, if you read the story, you will find that he needs Loot for some critical aspect of his sort of designs, his plans. With Vraska by his side, Jace has been hunting for Loot ever since he lost him during the events of Duskmorn. And this series is intended to show off sort of the why behind why someone would want to have Loot in their possession or be very good friends with them. It's highlighting his powers in action, guiding either the viewer or at least himself through omen paths from one plane to the next. The powers that he has that we know of are related to omen paths and the sort of the very fabric of the multiverse itself. He can't make them, but he can find them, and you can see sort of his powers interacting with the omen paths that he's found in the art for these cards.
Now, Mark, you started talking about it, but can you talk more about the role the lands play in like creating this feeling of a racing set?
Well, one of the things we asked ourselves is, okay, when we're doing a race, one of the key elements of a race is progression, right? Of seeing all the different things. And the reason we chose the lands we did is like, it's neat to see them racing on dunes or racing in, the prehistoric forest and stuff like that. And so, this didn't end up making it into the actual set, but like we had a mechanic, one of our mechanics in Handoff that we talked about is using lands as a way to represent that you've gone distance, you've gone space. But visually, like I said, the thing that's really nice in the actual finish set is that you really get a chance to see all the worlds we're on and get to see all the different possibilities. And like I said, it is, I don't know, you can talk more about the mechanicalness of the lands, but I do think the lands capture a sense of place that no other card type does.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I especially enjoy of these Verges. We got to pick the creative of these while working alongside the Duskmorn team. And the idea of being on the verge of something is perfect here, showing the omen paths, and you're getting to see 2 of our 3 planes on each of these cards.
Yeah. All right, and we continue the journey on our next set of lands, which we have down in the notes as the Country Roads cycle. So let's see these. Talk about the creation of these and their place in the set.
Yeah, so we decided very early on, this is the racing set, it's going to be a vehicle set. And a lot of working with vehicles is knowing how you're going to pilot them, crew them reliably. And so these lands are here to make sure everyone's got access to just a little bit of more ability to generate creatures to crew the vehicles.
Yeah, as we'll get into in a second. The set is about vehicles, the heart is set about vehicles, and so these lands very much are leaning into the mechanical heart of the set.
Yeah. And Yoni, were these always, these seem to have the exact same text. Was there ever any thought to like varying them, or did you want them to be all the same?
Yeah, there was some thought to it, but making that design constraint of being around vehicles and needing a lot of things to support them was really crucial to the design and iteration of this set. So we liked having these be the same for every color and really enable everyone to play with vehicles.
Okay.
And real quick, another thing that's important is one of the challenge of lands is you want to make lands that are good but not too good. And so when we really go hard, meaning this is really good, but in the right deck, it allows us to make things that are much stronger than they would be if they're just, they're strong no matter what, then it's hard for us to make them. But these, okay, they go in a very particular thing, and that is a deck that cares about vehicles and mounts. So that's this lean. We get to lean in our theme and then make something that's much stronger. That's it's a niche, but hey, in that niche, it's very strong.
Yeah. Well, and I love just like the Verge cycle, the art in these feels like you're taking us along the race. These are different snippets of the race, places on the different planes, and we see that again. In the common dual lands, which we've seen these before, we know them. They're the gain lands, but they do take us on a tour of the race. Miguel, talk a little bit about the concepting for these.
Yeah, so lands, like on the world building team, lands are always a ton of fun to get to work with because any given card, we get 2 inches of space to put art on there, right? Art is a super immediate way of conveying world building, story, tone, everything that we want our players to pick up on when they engage with our sets. So having these lands, we kind of knew from the top that we were just going to show scenes of the race. You're going to see other cars, other teams, right? Like in the Planeswalkers Guide, it dives into there's multiple different divisions and all this sort of technical stuff. But the getting a chance to show off more scenes of the race meant that we get to show off more vistas of the planes that we're on, more of the vehicles that we've designed, and just sort of continue to build a sense of this. how Mark was talking about earlier with the travelogue of the multiverse. There are things happening on camera and off camera, right? There's so much going on that we sort of figured these lands would be a great place to show off, what else is happening in the events of this race.
And Yoni, how did you land on these lands in the common slot?
Yeah, these are always great to have for limited, for have some extra mana fixing, and I appreciate that the gain life aspect of them in making sure that the set doesn't end up too aggressive. A lot of the concerns we had around the set were of it ending up very aggressive, both because vehicles can sometimes tend that way, and also the racing theme of the set wanted us to really promote aggression and care about going fast. Yeah.
All right, and then let's take a look at one last set of lands to continue to give us that racing theme. So these are the full art driver's seat basic lands, which literally put you in the driver's seat in the race. Just gorgeous and really cool.
Yeah, I love how the cycles all show off all three worlds. I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
Yep.
And also, shows off some of the racing teams. Like I love that the island is a pirate wheel for the keel hauler team.
Yep. The swamp is the insect vehicle, and very cool, very flavorful. So those are the full art driver's seat basic lands. All right, now of course everybody's racing. They're racing for a prize. We've talked about that prize before, but we've finally shown off the card today. So, Miguel, talk to us a little bit about the Aetherspark.
Yeah, so background on the Aetherspark. This is a Planeswalker Spark that has been captured at the moment of manifestation, following a process devised by an inventor on Avishkar. The Aetherspark itself is suspended inside of this artifact. It was originally intended to be a tool that would allow the common person to traverse the multiverse, sort of a prototype, a proof of concept that this power could be made accessible to everyone. However, the creation kind of coincided with the opening of Omen Paths. So while like the Aetherspark is not obsolete, it's been rendered to be more of a like an exotic curiosity. It's a valuable artifact. It's precious, but it's no longer as earth-shattering as it could have been. The story dives into the sort of the nuts and bolts of its creation as much as the story does. But it it for us on the world building team, again, this is a Omen Path era story, and a spark is. I don't want to say like curiosity in a bad way, but it's a curiosity in that it is like an embodiment of a time before, and we thought it would be super interesting to have in here as a valuable prize, as a story hook for later. Spoiled a bit in its card art there, just all in all, really fun to design around, a fun problem to have to figure out, how to bring it to life in art and in the story as well.
It also seemed like an interesting challenge to bring it to life as a card. Legendary artifact planeswalker equipment is not a type line we've seen before.
No.
You got to tell us how this card came to be.
Yeah, so this came out a little bit later in the design process when we locked in on really wanting to center this as the prize of the race, the reason why people are going for it, and so wanted to find find a design that captured how epic of a prize it would be, but also something that anyone could potentially attain. So thought a lot about all the ways that a creature could become a planeswalker, and we could show that, but it's pretty difficult to turn a permanent with the creature type into a planeswalker. There's a lot of rules baggage with that. Whereas this has surprisingly little rules baggage. You could already use a combination of cards to end up equipping a planeswalker to your creature, and the rules just kind of work for that. So this design is letting you to equip it to your creature. That gives the Aetherspark more power, which then you can use for these abilities that are somewhat generic in their output, and I like that just shows anyone could get this power and use it to do whatever it is they're looking to do.
Yeah, which is draw.
I do want to add one other thing. On the creative end, like we're thinking of for sort of spurring people to compete in the race, like what is a prize that is that would drive people to compete in a death race, right? But also has to be like very locally powerful in that it can't change in this set. It can't change the direction of the multiverse, right? But it can certainly like be a like locus, a thing of gravity around which an entire story can hinge. So the Aetherspark, had to fill that role as well creatively.
Yeah. And the Aetherspark is also the second card in our new Headliner series, where we take one card and really blow it out and do special things. In this case, you saw that there is a serialized version, up to 500 of the Aetherspark. Those are findable in collector boosters. Now, of course, other versions of the Aetherspark are available in all places as a normal Mythic Rare. All right. I saw someone in chat asking where the vehicles are. And
there are some vehicles.
There are some vehicles.
Yeah,
This is a
don't
racing
worry.
set. We have a whole section here because we're gonna dive into mechanics now, and we anticipated this. This is the first mechanic we're gonna talk about. So let's start talking about mechanics and vehicles and mounts specifically. So, Mark, let's start with you.
Okay, so we're doing a racing set. And one of the things we decided very early on is it's a travelogue. We want the worlds to show up. We have the Gearhulk. Like we wanted to see the characters and places and things of the world showing up. But first and foremost, it is a racing set. It is about racing. And I mean, top of the line, what does that mean? Like vehicles have to matter. Like we knew that like part of doing a racing set is we wanted vehicles to matter. And the way we thought of it is, look, there's a spectrum. There's like the low end of the spectrum. So what's the least number of vehicles? 0. Sets have 0. We made sets with 0. But what is the most? And I sort of said, okay, this set is that upper end of the spectrum. I don't know what it is. I knew that Yoni and Play Design and like a lot of other teams would have to figure out the right amount. But I knew that whatever we were at, we should be near the top of what was doable.
Yeah.
Not that I understood exactly how much was doable. So what we did is we spent a lot of time in vision design saying, okay, how do we make a lot of vehicles? So we came up with a few things we had to do. One was we made the conclusion that we shouldn't try to make a vehicle deck. That's just too hard to do. There's a lot of, because vehicles need creatures, but it causes a lot of problems. And we said, what we want to do is let's just make a lot of cool vehicles so that many, many different decks could play a handful of vehicles. And so the idea was you would see a lot of vehicles show up in standard, not that any one standard deck was like nothing but vehicles.
Sure.
Number 2, we said, in order for that to be true, we need vehicles to have a secondary purpose, because what we've learned looking at all the we spend a lot of time looking at what we've done before in vehicles, and the real successful vehicles were, hey, there's something else about them that has a purpose. Maybe they have an enter the battlefield effect, so they act like a spell. Maybe they do something before they turn into a vehicle. They produce mana or something, but it needed a secondary purpose. And the third thing we were always looking at is it also helps if there's more ways to turn them into creatures than just crew. Yeah, most of them should have crew. That's what you expect a vehicle to have. But one of the ways we could really make different decks care is giving you alternate ways to turn them into vehicles. And so we really explored that. And so those 3 vectors, we spent a lot of time. And a lot of what we did in Vision was just trying what are all the different secondary ways we can do things? What are all the different ways we can turn them in? And then give set design just a suite of things we could do so they could pick and choose what they wanted to do. And that was kind of the heart of how to make vehicles matter.
Now, I'm not sure if this happened in Vision or set design or somewhere in between, but this set also includes mounts.
That was a Vision.
Okay.
So the interesting story here, a lot of people are like, why'd you bring this mechanic back so quickly? And I'm like, that is not what happened. We were trying to solve the problem. We knew in a race that some people would want to ride things. And so we said, okay, let's see if we can solve that. And the way we solved it in this set was to make it like an offshooting of crew. That's the easiest way to do it, because we wanted cards that care about crewing. Well, what if we made a riding mechanic that was kind of like crew? Meanwhile, a completely different team, ironically, that I also read the vision for, was Outlaws of Thunder Junction. And they were trying to solve the problem from a different vantage point, which is, hey, we have a Western theme. Cowboys riding horses is about as Western as it gets. And so they were trying to solve the problem in a different way. They being me and the team that did, we solved it in a different way, which is a lot more top-down. When I say it was mutate-ish, it wasn't quite as complicated as mutate, but you put the creature on the horse and they became one creature shared together, and it was just a more complicated version of what we were trying to do. And once we did it here, it was clear that we shouldn't do the same thing a year apart in completely different ways. And we just came up with the cleaner, easier, more intuitive to learn thing. And so we went and talked, Dave Humphreys was the set design lead for that. And we said, look, let's not do it two different ways. Let's just do it this way. So they were first, so they introduced mounts. But mounts actually got designed by this team and then moved over to Outlaws Thunder Junction.
All right. Before we get into some sweet vehicles, let's take a look at one of those mounts since we're telling the mount story here. So this is Lagarin Soul of Alacria.
Yeah, so while we didn't want to focus so much on cramming all the vehicles into one deck, we did know some people would mostly just want to draft all the vehicles, thinking about that, and put it all together. So bundling together mounts and vehicles was a good way to ensure that even if you just drew all your cards that were part of this bucket, you would still be able to do some crewing. This is a good example of a card that bundles together mounts and vehicles. The green, white, and red, white limited archetypes are especially about filling your decks with mounts and vehicles, and cards like this that reward you for that.
Perfect.
Yeah, the trick to saddle is they're already creatures, right? So the key to crewing is you turn it into a creature. So the value of saddle had to be, well, the creature is better in some way because you're doing that. And normally what we want to do is really encourage you to attack with it, because that's the whole point, the reason to saddle it. And so we tend to give them attack triggers and stuff like that.
And then another big part of getting vehicles in limited was giving every color pair an uncommon gold vehicle. With the exception of green-white, this is green-white's vehicle, because flavorfully they're all about riding mounts.
That's a great segue, because our next two cards are some of those uncommon gold vehicles. So we've got Rocketeer Boost Buggy and Ranger's Ether Hive. All right, tell us how these cards came to be.
Yeah, so these both feature the exhaust mechanic that we'll cover a bit more later, but they're both good examples of how vehicles do a thing when you're not crewing them normally. The red-green one has an ability that turns it into a creature without using crew, and the green-blue one has just a static ability on the battlefield that will generate creatures that can help you crew it.
I'll also point out, we haven't talked about these yet, but we've got the borderless revved up cards. So you're going to see these on a lot of vehicles, and it's got this really cool art style. Those are going to be available in both play boosters and collector boosters. All right, now we're going to next reveal the best card in the set, bar none. The name's great, the effect is great. This card is perfect, so no notes, well done.
So the funny thing about this is, so when I made Evoke many, many years ago, the very first card I made to prove how Evoke worked was Muldrifter. And so when we were making vehicles, one of the, I don't know if the absolute first, but one of the very first suite of ones we made, we called it Muldrifter. It absolutely became Huldrifter.
Mole Space Drifter. That's so good too.
And so this card, I mean, it's been tweaked, but this card is one of the earliest vehicles we made, because we knew that one of the ways to make cool vehicles was to give them a cool enters effect, right? Like, in some ways, if you have a cool spell and you get a lot of value out of the spell, then, okay, the vehicle doesn't have to carry as much weight because, hey, you got a lot of equity right off the bat. And card drawing is awesome. And so, I mean, I think this pun got us there probably originally.
Yes, but also your love of this card is somewhat the point. Convincing people to put vehicles in their decks can be challenging. They have the fail case where you don't have creatures to crew them. And so we deliberately made many vehicles that are callbacks to classic cards so that people would immediately understand what their value was and why they want them in their deck.
Absolutely.
Drawing cards still good.
Drawing cards still good. The borderless revved up version is great as well. Okay, now you talked about vehicles mostly having like other uses, but there were, is there one, two that
I think it's literally one.
Literally one. Okay, this one here that we're going to show.
My rule at the end of design was for every vehicle, I wanted to have an answer. So what are you doing this when you aren't just crewing it? That can be an enters ability, a static ability. This ended up being the only exception for when your white-based limited decks just want to have more vehicles. You've drafted a lot of the cards that let you crew or help your vehicles. This is here to float around to you. But for the most part, or for the entirety, this kind of vehicle is not what you're going to see. They are doing other things.
Okay. Now we have gone, I don't want to say light on vehicles, but we've shown some uncommons and common vehicles. Obviously vehicles are a big part of this. There's going to be mythic ones, including Valor's Flagship. This is a doozy, and also, like you just mentioned, a callback.
Yep. Yeah, so we really appreciated the cycling ability here. Cycling is returning in the set. I personally like it because it helps. It's a thing we can put on vehicles so that you can cycle them when you're not able to crew them, and it just helps you find the right mix of cards that you need, which when you have a lot of vehicles in your deck is extra important.
Also, I should point out very early on, cycling is for Amonkhet, had cycling in it, and the funny thing is, cycling normally, the name is very generic, and so cycling almost never ever means anything flavorfully. But like we were making the racing set, like everybody just wanted to have cycling. And like I said, mechanically it's a great fit. Cycling fits in a lot of places well. In design, we actually tried a bunch of variants on it. I think we had bicycling and motorcycling, and we ended up just doing cycling. But there's something. It's kind of funny to me that like there's something about cycling finally finding its own as a flavor in a place where like, okay, now the flavor finally can tie in, which cycling doesn't really get it either.
Miguel, I did see a question in chat asking who or what is Valor?
Oh, Valor, this is the flagship of the Cloudspire Racing team. So Valor is a character that we have not revealed yet, but is quite important to the people of Kylum and Cloudspire Racing.
Very cool. And of course, the callback here on the cycling is
Decree of Justice.
Decree of Justice for old people like me.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so now we are going to move into our next mechanic. Start your engines. So Mark, tell us about where this idea originated from.
Yeah, so the concept was we knew, okay, we had the racers, the vehicles were the racers, but we wanted to represent the race. And so we really wanted a mechanic that said, okay, how do we feel like racing? What can we do that like feels like a race?
Yeah.
And this mechanic went through a bunch of changes. Early on, like the very, very earliest version of this, when you would start a race, everybody would join the race, basically. And then the first person to win would win I think like you won a treasure or something when you won. And the idea was we liked the idea of 3 legs because there's 3 worlds and each world's a leg. And so we really tied this whole thing. Over time, it got simplified a lot.
Yeah.
As is often the case, the vision design is the most flavorful, most complex version of it. And then as it gets fine-tuned through set design, play design, it gets sort of, it gets simplified a bit to make it a little more what you need to do and less complicated.
Yeah.
But the idea really is, okay, how do we make you mad about a race? Like there's a mechanic that just cares, and this is all about speed, right? You just want to increase your speed.
Yep.
And the other thing that was important was we didn't want a mini game that took away from the game ending. Like a lot of times we've tested mini games, and it's like, okay, stop playing your normal game of Magic, go do this other thing, and then when you're done, come back. And all it did was just extend the game. So we said, okay, well, what if we made what this was doing something that just ended the game? So we made it about attacking, and we realized that racing, the idea of like your vehicles attacking felt very much like racing, but felt like it matched it. So it all sort of came together. I mean, Yannick talked a little bit about the simplifications of this.
Yeah. I really appreciated that this gets you attacking. It makes you care about doing stuff early in the game. In Magic, when we talk about speed, we're usually talking about being aggressive and attacking early in the game, and this is what the mechanic rewards. But I also appreciate that the actual rewards we put on the card, like this ability that lets you draw cards, are more helpful for the late game.
Sure.
It also helps bridge there's a weirdness with the flavor of a death race, where in moment to moment, it's very much about going fast and being speedy, but it takes place over multiple days, and it's a war of attrition. The max speed abilities helping you in a longer game both help make it so that limited isn't entirely about games ending quickly, and show those things that help you get through a race of attrition.
Now, I do see some questions about how the mechanic works in chat. First of all, your best source for those sorts of rules things, there's going to be, at the conclusion of this stream on dailymtg.com, a mechanics article, Aetherdrift Mechanics, and it'll spell out exactly how this works. But real quick, couple questions. So when you start your engines, that's just for you, not for your opponent, correct?
Just for you, yeah.
Okay. When you hit max speed, it's like a threshold mechanic. You're there for the rest of the game.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah, like kind of like City's
You can
Blessing.
stop counting.
Yeah.
The idea is you have to count sort of you have to get up to 3 basically, but then don't worry about it. You're there.
Then you're there.
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any ways to lose speed?
No.
There's one
okay.
one that
Okay.
we'll see
Sorry.
soon.
Okay.
But I don't expect that to be a huge part of gameplay.
Okay, it's an exception
Yes.
rather than
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And so, yeah, the way I like to think about it is you just need to make your opponent lose life on 3 of your turns. Once you start tracking your speed, you're at 1. You can immediately go up to 2 on that same turn. Your next turn, you can go up to 3 and then up to 4.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay. Let's move on to our next preview card with Starter Engines, and this one is a doozy because Hazoret Godseeker has joined the race. First of all, before we get into the mechanics of this card, Miguel, why does a god care about this race?
The race goes through Hazoret's plane, so Hazoret's going to care about it. I could dive into a bit about Amonkhet right now. It's a plane in sort of a tough position, right? This it's connected to Avishkar by a relatively stable Owen path. Avishkar is doing its big sort of like soft power diplomatic push in order to insulate itself from the threats of the multiverse. Part of that, a big plank of that is the expansion of the Ghirapur Grand Prix out to across multiple planes. So I mean, you can see in the background there. There's racetrack going through Avishkar, right? Or sorry, going through Amonkhet. Amonkhet, as I mentioned, is in a tough position. They're free of Bolus. They're free of the Phyrexian invasion. They are free, but they are on their own until Avishkar comes around. And as they're in a position where they're basically willing to accept this race coming through, and involving ancient ruins and going across their lands, and in exchange for like it's a messy but mutually beneficial imperfect help to shore them up now in order to face the unknowns of their newly liberated home. So Hazoret is going out from Noctimoon, as Hazoret's title implies, is seeking other deities that may or may not be appearing across Amonkhet, and using the sort of the forward advance of the Ghirapur Grand Prix to help them do that.
All right. Yoni, back to you on mechanics on this. This is a 2-mana indestructible haste 5/3.
Yep. Yeah. This is one that is definitely rewarding you for getting your speed up very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
In the debut video, we saw Vin Wixit and Mendicant Core, which are legends that are more about having a strong max speed ability that'll carry you for the entire rest of the game and give you staying power. But this one is really rewarding you for being aggressive, and I've seen this thing attacking on turn 4 if you have the right combination of effects and you're taking your speed management seriously.
Yeah, red decks don't care about attacking at all.
Yeah, and another, just to point out, we knew that the focal point of the mechanics was racing, but one of the reasons to do a travelogue in the first place is, hey, we are on 3 different worlds, and that it's the individual card design, sometimes the cycle design, that really sort of shows that off. And so this is a good example where, hey, we're visiting Amonkhet. Yeah, I mean, okay, a lot of the gods didn't make it through the original Amonkhet, but one of them did. And so we get to see him. So
yeah, and the graffiti version of this card is pretty sick as well. And again, not a yellow border. It is a gold foiling. Revisit that video. All right, let's move on to our next mechanic. We've already seen it in some of the cards we were looking at, but we haven't talked about it. Exhaust. So we'll put up Rocketeer Boost Buggy again. Where did Exhaust come from? What are we trying to do with this?
Well, so if you read my article next week, I'll do the long version of this. I'll just say the story begins, we started with energy, and we ended with exhaust. So for the full story, I'll talk about that in my article next week. But this was not, exhaust happened in set design. We did not hand off exhaust. We handed off energy. But exhaust is something that we've talked about for a long time. So I mean, Yanni can get, this is a mechanic we've messed around with for many years.
Okay.
Yeah, it comes probably closest to the monstrous ability, or adapt, where you just one time pay some mana to make your creature stronger. This did start out as energy. We loved the idea of a mechanic representing fuel and all the powerful things people were doing to fuel their vehicles and bring powerful moments to the race. The energy mechanic, we tried a lot of different versions of it and moved to something that was somewhat similar to this exhaust mechanic, where you're usually paying mana in addition to energy costs for a big one-time ability. That didn't work out for some reasons, and now we ended up on this use this ability only once per game as sort of the most broad version of the monstrous mechanic,
Sure.
where we can really give you any effect that you're using once per game. Usually on commons and uncommons, it's on creatures that get stronger or vehicles that turn into creature, and it uses counters to track it. Some of the effects on rares and mythics are a lot splashier and aren't using anything to track it, and we just think they're splashy enough. You're going to remember this happened.
Like our next card.
Yep.
Good transition there, Yoni.
So this Draconautics Engineer shows both sides of that. It's got a cheap ability that only was 1 mana, and it uses a counter to track that you've used it, as well as a more expensive ability of making a 4/4 flying dragon dinosaur that you're probably going to remember having used.
Because it's there, and it's probably attacking your opponent for 4 in the air.
Yep.
And this is a good example. Magic has done once per game effects before.
Yeah.
But this is really sort of consolidating it, giving a name to it. And you can notice, by the way, the reason we call it exhaust is, I think originally this was called Turbo. And Turbo was like a great racing term, but we knew we liked it so much, like we wanted to use it in other places. And Turbo was a lot harder to use in random places than exhaust.
Yeah.
So.
And giving it a name was very helpful mechanically, as we saw in the green-blue vehicle. It said whenever you used an exhaust ability, if this was just an unnamed ability where it just said use this only once, we wouldn't be able to refer to it that way. So the green-red and green-blue limited archetypes are a lot about exhaust cards and have cards that reward you for using those abilities.
You're knocking it out of the park on transitions here, because we do have a green card. Correct me, is this the only way to get multiple exhausts out of a single card? Okay, so let's see this, an Elvish Refueler.
Yeah, so this lets you use your exhaust abilities repeatedly. Once per turn, you can use an ability that you've already used. There are other ways to use them again. If the creature leaves the battlefield and then returns to the battlefield, it's an entirely new card by the game rules, so you will be able to use this again. But this, in Limited, is doing a lot to let you reuse your abilities to fuel your strategy.
Very cool. Like the concept here. It's a refueler. That's great. Okay. We already teased that. All right, so that covers it for mechanics, but that doesn't mean we're done with preview cards, because we just got sort of a pile of 4 cards that are cool.
Yeah.
They're
There are
great.
some cool cards in the set.
And there's cool cards in the set. And we haven't talked about Murganda or shut off Murganda a lot, so we're going to do a little bit of that, not with this next card, but with some of these. First up, this is a card that's definitely going to turn some heads because it is reminiscent of a pretty powerful card. So let's take a look at Repurposing Bay. Yoni, tell us about this one.
Yeah, so this is letting you turn your artifacts into other artifacts from your deck with a mana value 1 higher, letting you churn through your deck. It works very well with the vehicles in the set, a lot of which have enters the battlefield effects. And the white, blue, and blue-black limited archetypes focus a lot on artifacts, so this plays a lot into those strategies.
Okay. Was this always blue?
Yes, it was always blue. Definitely trying to be a reference to Birthing Pod, but with artifacts.
Now, Birthing Pod is a pretty dangerous place. Tinker's a pretty dangerous card.
Yep.
Like, you're smashing all these cards together. How do we feel about this this card going into Standard?
Yeah, shout out to Play Design for sticking with me for this one. Conveniently, a lot of our most competitive players have a lot of nostalgia for Birthing Pod.
Yep.
So they were happy to put this card through its paces, which was very needed.
Will be off the. 30 seconds from now, someone will have thought of some combos. from
Yes.
this, and they'll be all over.
And
the
it's
internet.
broken.
And no, but this card looks really sweet. I'm excited to try this out in a couple different decks. Next up, we have a returning card that I don't think anyone would have called, but it's awesome. So let's see the return of Bloodghast.
Yeah, returning is right. This card ended up here because one of the play designers, Ben Whites, came to me and said, I thought it'd be really cool in Pioneer, and I was like, sure, I'll put it in the set. Probably somebody will tell me not to. And in the end, nobody told me not to. I mostly appreciate it because he's actually pretty good at crewing vehicles. He always comes back from the graveyard when you need him.
Yep.
We saw in the debut video a black vehicle that has crew 2 and wants you to discard cards, so it's great friends with this guy. I also appreciated the Vampire Spirit type line. That didn't really make any sense in what we've seen of Avishkar or Amonkhet. So it was nice to have Muruganda as a bit more of a wild card plane where I could just go to creative and be like, can I have a vampire spirit somewhere? And they're like, sure, it exists on Muruganda.
Yeah, Miguel, tell us Bloodghast Muruganda thing.
Yeah, so Muruganda is, I think I said it up top, and if I didn't say it, I was thinking it. Muruganda, like one of the benefits of coming to a place like not entirely blank page, but having like a couple guardrails is that we can really, on the world building creative side, just do a ton to say like, to throw forward, right, to future set, make it a future sets problem. Basically being like, yeah, that sounds cool. Muruganda does have spirit vampires. Miguel, in X number of years, figure out what that means. And I'm very excited to do that. We have so much about Muruganda that I personally worked on, and a few other folks worked on as well, that is like cutting room floor for the set, but will live on on teams. And,
I think of Muruganda as a throw forward set.
Yeah.
Like future sight, just like,
Future
okay.
sight here.
Okay, hey,
yeah.
there's dinosaurs, and then we made Mimisaur. Hey, there's oozes.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
Mark, I know you talk about keywords returning here and there every once in a while. This card says landfall.
Yes.
How do you feel about that?
Well, so there's two things going on.
Yeah.
One is we've just upped the number of what we call deciduous mechanics.
Yeah.
Even though cycling is an official part of the set in a much bigger way, cycling, landfall, flashback, there's just some mechanics that we've sort of said, hey, these are just such key mechanics. When we bring them back, we can bring them back a small number. They're just very useful.
Yeah.
They show up in foundations and stuff like that. So there's that. The other thing is the set we've started doing a lot more what we call cameos. And what a cameo is, it says, usually at a higher rarity, we'll do one of old mechanics that just are very flavorful and make a lot of sense. In this particular place, hey, we have a bunch of worlds that we've been to before that we can make reference to. And so, not that Landfall specifically is this, but there are definitely some cameos of Aetherspark and Amonkhet. I mean, Muruganda doesn't really have mechanics. Although we did tease the vanilla thing a little bit, the Vanilla Matters theme. But like you definitely will see some stuff like that. So there's some returning mechanics that aren't in large volume, but they're in small number. Just nod, hey, we're in Aetherspark, we're in Amonkhet, and stuff like that.
Yeah, in the debut video, we saw the Basriket card, which
Yeah.
references Exert, the Amonkhet mechanic.
Yep.
We thought about doing a similar thing mechanically, just using stun counters, but in the end, we decided, no, using the word from the Amonkhet set is the cool thing to do.
Yeah.
Sweet. Now we've got a removal spell that's actually pretty good friends with Bloodghast. So let's take a look at Quag Feast. Yoni, tell us about this one.
Yeah, this is mostly here to support the black-green archetype, which is about filling your graveyard, as well as to work with cards like Bloodghast. It's a removal spell, but also gets you some extra mill, which is very valuable in those strategies. And you'll notice, of course, this card is killing vehicles as well as creatures and planeswalkers. We wanted to make sure that there were some answers in the set to the strong vehicles we're providing.
All right. Yeah, very cool. Simple, interesting removal spell, but if you mill a Bloodghast, you've done the thing. All right.
One thing we always look at is whatever our theme is, in this case, vehicles is the theme, you'll just see us making a lot more referencing, and both positive and negative. Like there'll be more answers to it, but also there'll be more synergy with it.
Yep.
So.
All right, our final preview card is going to be out of Muruganda. We talked about dinosaurs. Here is Aganosaur Rex. I spent all last night pronouncing dinosaur names to our kids, so I'm fairly positive of that. But we've got an 8/8 Trampler for 5 mana with cycling that does a thing when it cycles.
Yeah, so Muruganda had a few things we wanted to reference, but the biggest thing of all is just being big. And this card is really trying to focus on that.
And dinosaurs.
And
dinosaurs.
Yes,
it's
of
big,
course.
it's a dinosaur. It's got some fantastic flavor text on that alt art.
Yeah.
The Borderless Rude Rider.
Oh, and we didn't talk a lot about cycling. One of the things this set does is it does a lot of traditional cycling, but also there's a lot of the generate effect when you cycle. So it sort of like makes it kind of a modal card because I can get the creature or I can kind of get a spell out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, that covers all the preview cards we have. We have a couple minutes if people have questions. You can put them in chat, tag @Magic, so it's easier for me to see. Reminder, we are talking about Aetherdrift. I'm only going to answer questions, or these people are going to answer questions. I'm not going to answer them. About Aetherdrift. If it's about another topic, we'll cover that another time. But if you have questions about Aetherdrift, about how a mechanic works, about a card, or where things are found, different treatments are found, any of that sort of stuff, we will try to answer them with the few minutes we have left. So let's see, are there, they say, are there anime cards in this set? Are there Japan? Yes, there are Japan showcase cards in this set. So for that, to learn more about that, there's going to be a collecting Aetherdrift article. It already exists. It's going to get updated, or maybe it's already been updated, again, on dailymtg.com. That will talk more about that. All right, let's see. What else? This is going fast. Lots of great questions. All right. Speed question. Can you track speed if you have a speed card that entered the battlefield and then left, or do those cards need to be present to gain speed?
Yes, you'll continue tracking speed as soon as you control a permanent with the start your engines mechanic. Your speed will be tracked.
Okay. Is there a way for us to track exhaust in pre-release kits?
Good question. I'm not.
Normally, the pre-release kits have some punch-out stuff.
Yeah.
And my gut is, I don't definitively know this, there is something in that you probably could use to reference it. But I've not. I just know there's punch-outs in all the pre-release boxes.
Yeah, I don't remember where that ended up, and I will say that the set was tested in paper using exhaust cards.
Yeah.
And so we were very aware of the tracking burden and making sure that the individual designs and the way the set played out was reasonable to track.
Yeah, well, and you said that, is it all or almost all of the exhaust cards have some sort of counter or something that...
Yeah, I believe all the ones at common and uncommon.
Okay.
At higher rarities, they might not.
And the high rarity ones also usually do something so big in scope that it's hard to forget that you did this giant thing in scope.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, I saw a question about which boosters you can get which art in. So just real quick, so the first place foil, so the foiling, and I know there are questions about the foiling, producer Sean, if we can maybe put that foiling video back up again. The first place foiling cards, those are found in the box toppers. The Japan Showcase, which we didn't show any here, but the Japan Showcase, those are found in collector boosters. The serialized headliner, also found in collector boosters. That's just the Aetherspark, just the out of 500 version. And then extended art, as always, is found in collector booster. All the other art, so the Rude Riders, the Revved Up, the Graffiti Giant, the Borderless, those can be found in both play boosters and collector boosters. So most everything that you saw in alt art, the art is going to be available in either one. Yeah. All right, let's get back to chat's questions here. Is there any way to gain more than 1 speed per turn?
No. You'll play the card, go to 1 speed. You can still gain the 1 speed that turn to go to 2 the turn you play it.
If you get a second combat, can you get it?
No.
No.
Okay, so it's only once per turn you can get. All right.
Right.
All right. I think we answered this earlier, but it's good to reiterate. Can the exhaust ability be used again if the card blinks out?
Yes. Once the card leaves the battlefield and returns, it's an entirely new object, and you can use the ability again.
All right. We've seen that every color pair has vehicle signpost uncommons, except for white-green, which is saddle. Are there any non-vehicle signposts as well?
Yes. In addition to the 9 vehicles and 1 Legoran, there are 10 more gold uncommons, which are not vehicles.
All right. Let's see. Are we going to see more familiar legendary creatures return? We saw a few here. We saw Basri. We saw Hazaret. Should we expect more?
Yeah, there's at least 1 or 2 returning characters that we have not indicated at yet.
Yeah. In my teaser, I said that there were 4 Disparked Planeswalkers. We haven't seen all of them yet. And there are definitely characters from the world, especially Avishkar and Amonkhet, because people would know the characters from those worlds. Well, there's a character from Muruganda, we might say again. So yeah, characters you might recognize are showing up. So there are some familiar faces because part of going to the worlds is seeing some familiar faces.
Yep.
All right. I'm going to ask this question because I saw this comment a little bit about the black-blue Gearhulk. why does the black-blue Gearhulk look so much worse than the others? I saw a lot of comments in that space. But when you all handed off, like, these are the cards that we believe are going to be like the top tier, the blue-black Gearhulk was up there.
Yeah, I believe in that Gearhulk.
Yeah.
It can be, it's a 4-power card, so a lot less expensive than the 6-mana one.
Yep.
It does a lot of different things. You can target yourself to get some card selection. You can target your opponent to make sure they don't have the removal that'll be able to get this Gearhulk off the board, which with its Ward 1 is even more difficult to do. And Lifelink does a lot of stuff on the board.
Well, especially at 4/4. Yeah, a lot of people have not played with the Vendilion Click, and it shows. Yeah. No, I think that card will be pretty strong. All right. Let's see. Will we see all the gods from Amonkhet?
No,
No.
we will not. But we will. We see Hazard obviously because we previewed that. We also will meet some new gods that we haven't seen before.
Yep. All right. One last question. I'm gonna do this as a little bit of a tease because we were talking about it before the stream started. So this one's going to Miguel. It just says Garrick ? But they're referencing a piece of art. That looks kind of like Garrick.
Yeah, it does. I want to keep my job, so I can't answer that question.
Okay, but you're not.
But no. Yeah, if you think that that's this familiar looking silhouette, then these are the questions that we like to ask. I like to prompt people to ask during world building. So.
All right, well, that is all the time we have for today. Thank you for tuning in. Previews for Aetherdrift are going to be going on this week and next. Be sure to head to dailymtg.com right about now for all kinds of information, more on mechanics, more on collecting, more preview cards, design stories, all of that sort of stuff. Head to dailymtg.com right now. Otherwise, next week, we're going to get back and we're going to be focusing on special guests and some of the awesome art in this set. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.